Good evening, everyone. Welcome, and welcome to the attendees from the Chinese class. So for the benefit of people that are joining us for this class, and literally just for this class, I guess, um, where my topic over the last few years have been on Venerable Yin-Shun's book, The Way to Buddhahood, 成佛之道. And 2 years ago, we had covered chapter 1. The year before last, we covered chapter 2. Last year, we started on chapter 3, but we only got halfway through. So this year, I'm hoping to finish off the other half of chapter 3. And so far, for the few lessons that we've had yesterday and today, we've gone through the topics of what are the righteous practices for the human and the heavenly vehicle? And these are captured in the 3 meritorious practices, which are generosity, upholding the precepts, and meditative concentration, or training to develop meditative concentration. So far where we're at, we've covered the righteous practice of generosity, and we're partway through the practice of upholding the precepts. And where we left off from this morning's class was concerning the 5 precepts. So we had gone through each of the 5 precepts. And this is where we will continue with this evening's talk. And this is a bit of a wrap-up part to give a more holistic explanation about the 5 precepts. So if you recall back to chapter 1, so that's 3 years ago, when we spoke about taking refuge in the Triple Gem, usually after taking refuge, one also commits to upholding the 5 precepts. So traditionally in the Mahayana, particularly in the Chinese tradition, when you take on the taking refuge in the Triple Gem, after you've carried out that ceremony, it almost immediately flows through with the ceremony to take the 5 precepts as well. And this half verse indicates how long that commitment is for, and it also praises the benefits of doing so. So in this half verse, it says, the 5 precepts are upheld until the end of this life. Such persons are the place where all good fortune accumulate. So if you're having trouble trying to convince someone to take the precepts, then you can tell them, if you take the 5 precepts, then you will be one where all good fortune accumulates. Now, taking refuge reflects having faith in the Triple Gem, and this is not a blind faith. This is a faith that comes from conviction that this is the right thing to do, and this will actually give me the direction and the path and the protection and guidance and so forth that I'm looking for in my spiritual practice. Upholding the 5 precepts is the practical manifestation of taking refuge in the Triple Gem. So when we say, I want to take refuge in the Triple Gem, it's not just simply attend a ceremony, recite after the monks and nuns, do a few prostrations and that's it. That's the ceremonial aspect. But if that's what you think taking refuge in the Triple Gem is, then that's a very superficial understanding. A deeper understanding is, well, how can I benefit from taking refuge in the Triple Gem? And this is where the practical manifestation starts to take its place. And this comes through with upholding and practicing the 5 precepts. So if you take refuge, but you don't take the 5 precepts, then you can only be regarded as an upasaka or upasika by name. And moreover, the act of taking refuge is also merely in name. So this is like a king who actually has no power to rule his kingdom. Now, when one takes refuge in the Triple Gem, one willingly declares, until the end of this life, I take refuge in the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha. Accordingly, the 5 precepts should also be upheld until the end of this life. And during the taking of refuge ceremony, one also states, from today until the end of my life, I will protect all lives. And this is effectively vowing to uphold the precepts. So upholding the precepts stems from a compassion-based practice of stepping into others' shoes, which is what we discussed in this morning's class. And here they take the action of no killing, which is to protect lives, as the basis or as the representative. So when you make the vow, from today until the end of my life, I will protect all lives, that is a vow to uphold the precepts. But don't take that literally as only to uphold precept number 1 of no killing. So this single line vow implies upholding all 5 precepts. Now, originally, taking refuge involves committing to uphold the precepts, as in to uphold all of the precepts. And therefore, after the ceremony of taking refuge in the Triple Gem, eventually, ceremonially, there's also a formal ceremony to then take the 5 precepts, where you do actually recite each of the precepts and then make a commitment to uphold them. So one who truly intends to take refuge in the Triple Gem will not reject the practice of upholding the 5 precepts. Now, turning over a new leaf with only faith and no practical action clearly proves that the faith you have in the Triple Gem is not thorough or not as genuine as it should be. So such a follower cannot be regarded as a true upasaka or upasika. Nevertheless, we always have a but here. We go to the idea or the concept of skillful means, and the Buddha, with his great compassion and understanding that some householders have ingrained habits, and so they may find it hard to uphold all the 5 precepts in a pure way immediately. So if the requirements placed on household followers are too strict, it may actually be a deterrent, or it has a deterring effect or an obstructive effect on their progress towards learning and practicing the Dharma. So consequently, based on each person's ability to uphold some or all of the precepts, there are categories of upasaka and upasika. Now, if someone is able to only uphold one of the 5 precepts, they are considered a minor upasaka, upasika. If they uphold 2 of the precepts, they are a partial upasaka, upasika. If they can uphold 3 or 4 of the precepts, then they are a major upasaka, upasika. And if they uphold all 5 precepts, then they are a full upasaka, upasika. So accordingly, among the lay followers who have taken refuge in the Triple Gem, those who uphold all 5 precepts and can uphold them purely are considered the best of the best. Now, this expedient means of allowing people to partially uphold the precepts is not universal, I have to say. So I'm telling you here that there are some schools of Buddhism that will allow this to happen. There are some monks who, when they offer the Triple Gem refuge and the 5 precepts, they will offer this convenience as an expedient means to encourage people to take up the 5 precepts. But then there are some school of thoughts that are a bit more black and white with no gradual scaling. So they will basically say it's all or nothing. Ideally, of course, is to take all 5 precepts. But I think we have to understand, you know, given our we exist in an age with so many temptations and so forth. If you come across someone who is serious about learning the Dharma, then I would say still encourage them to take up, even if they can only be a partial or even a minor upasaka, upasika. But you must have a final goal of guiding them to eventually become a full upasaka, upasika. Do you understand? So it's only a temporary expedient means. And the final goal should be to help them develop their practice and faith to the point where they then say, no, I'm not satisfied with just being a partial or minor or even just a major upasaka, upasika. I want to be a full upasaka. And then they can take refuge and take the precepts again. And this time they will become a full upasaka, upasika. So when you allow this exception, as a skillful means, remember, it has to be guided with wisdom. And therefore, the wisdom aspect here is that you shouldn't allow someone to permanently just be a partial upasaka until the end of their life, basically. Okay? So among those who uphold all 5 precepts, there are some who uphold the precepts more purely, and these practitioners can be described as the place where all good fortune accumulate. So just like being in possession of the money pearl, which attracts all valuable gems. Now, on account of upholding the precepts in this life, one will not contravene the laws of any country and so will be protected and respected by society. And such a person is cherished by both humans and the heavenly beings and protected by the heavenly guardians, while all the evil ghosts and spirits will actually try to avoid such a person. So therefore, such a person always enjoys good fortune and things go smoothly. When one upholds the precepts and does not carry out any unwholesome actions, their mind will be wholesome and they will experience rebirth in the human or heavenly realms in their future lives. So remember, we're talking about what are the practices that will lead to rebirth as a human or rebirth in the heavenly realms for those who make the choice of following the human and the heavenly vehicles. So here it's saying that if you uphold the 5 precepts and you uphold them well, then cause and effect, the functioning of karma means that this will then allow you to be sure of a human or a heavenly rebirth. And whether you have a human or heavenly rebirth, that then goes to your vows as well. So you can rely on the practice. Once you practice upholding the precepts, also coupled with the meritorious practice of generosity, then you can approach this further by adding to that the practice of meditative concentration to develop wisdom. And in this way, even by upholding the 5 precepts, you can transfer yourself or move your practice towards the transcendental virtues. So that wraps up the aspects of the 5 precepts. And now we come to the second type of wholesome precepts that are practices suitable to the heaven and human vehicles. And this is the 8 precepts, or sometimes it's called the fasting precepts. And here the half verse says, 8 precepts advance one's practice for a day and night, following the lifestyle and practices of the monastics. So the 8 precepts are no killing, no stealing, no sexual activity, no lying, no consumption of alcohol. So the first 5 are pretty much the same as the 5 precepts, with the exception of number 3. That's a much more stricter requirement on the practitioner. And then number 6 is the no use of flowers and perfumes to adorn the body, as well as no participation in song, dance, entertainment, and so forth. So at times, this 6th precept is split into 2, where you have one precept states no use of flowers and perfumes to adorn the body, and the other would be no participation in song, dance, entertainment, and so forth. But this split will only come when we're talking about the 10 precepts in the novice precepts and so forth. But here, for the 8 precepts, these 2 aspects are combined into one. The 7th is to abstain from sitting or sleeping on large and luxurious seatings or beddings. So keeping this in mind, whenever you're hosting a venerable, as much as you may like to offer the best of the best to them, we also do uphold our precepts. Remember, these 8 precepts are to allow householders to uphold the precepts that are similar to that of the monastics. And as part of our monastic precepts, there is one that basically says, no use of luxurious items. So if you're hosting a venerable in your home, then definitely make sure you offer decent bedding, but anything too luxurious might actually then force us, when we use it, to be in partial contravention of our precepts. Do you understand? Okay, so just bear that in mind. And the 8th precept here is to abstain from eating at improper times, which means to avoid consuming food after midday. And this 8th precept is the fasting aspect, when sometimes the 8 precepts are referred to as the 8 fasting precepts. So the last 3 precepts, 6, 7, and 8, are effectively the same as what a monastic would uphold. And this is part of the novice precept. So as a monastic, we already uphold precept 6, 7, and 8 from the time we are a novice. Okay. So household followers do not renounce the home life. So naturally, their practice is unlike that of a monastic follower. And yet some people, they do admire the monastic life and would like to experience it for a short period of time. So the Buddha set forth these 8 precepts to actually give householders the opportunity to practice the precepts for one day and night in a very similar manner to what a novice would do. So when practitioners uphold the 8 precepts, it also slowly helps them to move onto the path of transcendence, because monastics, our final goal is liberation. So it's the transcendental state, nirvana, and so forth. And our monastic precepts are all geared to help us move in that direction. Householders, your precepts are geared to help you basically maintain the human or heavenly vehicle practice. So if you slowly want to move your practice towards the transcendental side, then this is a good stepping stone, the practice of the 8 precepts. And when one upholds the 8 precepts, usually they would reside with or near the Sangha. And this is why the precepts are sometimes also called the proximate precepts. Proximate in the meaning that we stay close to the Sangha. So the 5 precepts are upheld until the end of this life, yet it is also practiced by householders. So remember, we were talking that the 5 precepts are fundamental across all 5 vehicles. Now, when you uphold the 8 precept, it's only for a short period of time. So this is starting to compare the 5 and the 8 precepts. So the 5 precepts, not as strict, but you uphold it. The commitment is for the end of this life. So duration-wise, it's much longer. Conversely, the 8 precepts are more strict in terms of what it requires you to abide by. But duration-wise, it's only for a day and a night. So originally, the design of this practice is for a day and a night. But over time, there are practices. So, for example, in some retreats, particularly the Pure Land retreats that I've attended in the past, they go for 7 days. And at the start of that retreat, we take the 8 precepts, and the commitment is for that full 7 days as well. So Buddha prescribed that these 8 precepts, or the 8 fasting precepts, are to be upheld for 1 day and 1 night. And generally, and this goes back to ancient Indian customs, these fasting days are the 1st, the 8th, the 14th, 15th, 23rd, 29th, and the 30th of each lunar month. So what happens back in Buddha's time is on these special days, people would go to the monasteries and they would sincerely request from the monastics, please confer on me the 8 precepts and allow me to practice it for a day and night. And then they will spend that day there at the temple or close by the temple and practice the 8 precepts. And when does these precepts dissolve away? It dissolves away the next morning when the sun rises, basically. So I remember the monk would tell us, because back then some people would say, oh, that means I can't eat after lunch. And they said, so when can I eat again? And the monk would say, well, when you can see the lines on your palm with natural sunlight the next morning. So it's quite funny in the dormitories, everyone would say, can I see my lines yet? Because they've got snacks in their bags. So I don't know, have you guys taken up the 5 precepts for this particular retreat? Yes? No? Yeah? Okay. Well, that's very good. I shouldn't mention food then.
If I want to take longer than 1 day, is it possible? It's okay.
It is possible. It is possible. Some people, so some people, I know of some people who would, in front of the Buddha statue, they would then make the vow. Today, I vow to uphold the 8 precepts, and then that to them, the Buddha is the one conferring the precepts on them. Particularly in the West, if it's convenient for you to come here and ask the abbot to give you the precepts, then and if he's happy to do that and so forth, then that would be more ideal because you have that actual interaction with the Sangha.
This one, the master give me the 8 prescription, but he says only 1 day, but I want to take longer.
Yeah.
It's okay, right?
Yes.
Should I talk to him saying I want to take
You can ask him. So I'm not too clear about how they normally run it here. I remember.
5 and then 6, 7, 8. It's the same as your slideshow.
Yes,
I
yes.
was, talk in English. I feel a little bit surprised when I was speaking English, but after that he says only for one day.
Yeah, yeah,
I want 3 days at least.
yeah. So, um, uh, traditionally it is only for one day because of the fasting days. A lot of these traditions are culturally adopted from ancient India, and so some of the ancient Indian the Brahmin practices. Likewise, on these fasting days, they would do a lot of good deeds and stuff because, according to them, that's when the police force from the heavenly police force, so to speak, will come down and take note of who's doing good things, doing bad things, and so that's the way they kind of explain karma, and that's why on these fasting days, people make sure they want to do good and appear to be doing good. And as a skillful means, Buddha also adopted these fasting days as days where householders who want to try the monastic life for one day can come and take the 8 precepts. So,
because where I stay is really far from any temple, and I do not have any issue for
yeah.
For this 7 specific day, can I go to the Buddha at my house? I have my.
Yes, you have 4 tongue.
I told, can I
yes.
tell
Yeah.
that I want to take
yeah, that's how I know of some people who are too far away from any Sangha member. Then and if you're absolutely sincere about it and you make that vow in front of the Buddha statue, the intention is there, the sincerity is there. So the effects, and the fact is you will be upholding the 8 precept for that time that you committed to do it. So I assume you will. Yes. So the merit is there. The merit is there. Yeah. Yeah, yeah. It's an expedient way. So ideally, if you can get a monastic to confer it would be good. But in your situation, as you say, you live too far away. So the next best is in front of the Buddha statue. Yes.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yep. Okay. Okay. So this table basically summarizes the comparison. Because remember, when we uphold the precepts, there is merit that comes with that. Apart from doing good deeds, you get the merit of doing good deeds, and then you get the merit of upholding the precepts and upholding them well. So, in terms of level of strictness in what you have to do, 8 precepts are more strict, 5 precepts are less strict, but the 5 precept is a commitment till the end of your life, whereas the 8 precepts are only for a short period of time. So when some people try to debate, well, which is better? Should I uphold the 5 precepts or the 8 precepts? There's no definitive answer. My answer would be both. So uphold the 5 precepts when you take refuge, and then as the occasions allow, where there are retreats that offer the 8 precepts, then also take that opportunity as well. And when you take it, remember, this is to help you experience the monastic life. So if you take the 8 precepts, hopefully you can reflect a bit more on, okay, well, this is how a monastic would live, I guess. And then you can start to kind of see if you like it, if you want to come to this side. So that's on the 5 precepts and the 8 precepts. Now we come to the 10 wholesome precepts, or sometimes called the 10 wholesome deeds. Now, this is the last set of wholesome precepts that the 5-vehicle practitioners should undertake. So here, there are actually 2 verses to outline these 10 wholesome deeds. And it says, no killing, stealing, and sexual misconduct, no lying and no double tongue, no harsh speech and no idle speech, abandon greed, hatred, incorrect views. The foundation of all wholesome karma, Buddha teaches, is the 10 wholesome deeds. Wholesome human and heavenly practices rely on it. The 3-vehicle path is established on account of it. So these are the 2 verses that sum up the 10 wholesome deeds. So this first verse basically lists out what are the 10 precepts or the 10 wholesome deeds. And this next verse gives praise to reveal the importance of the 10 wholesome deeds. So the Vinaya regulations set by the Buddha have formal ceremonies where there is a teacher who confers the precepts onto the practitioner who wants to accept the precepts. However, when it comes to the 10 wholesome deeds, there is no formal ceremony for these 10. Nonetheless, according to the teachings in the chapter on the 10 bhumis in the Avatamsaka Sutra, as well as in sutras such as the Upasaka Precept Sutra, treatise on entering the middle way, compendium of the perfection, and so forth, in these scriptural texts, they all say that the 10 wholesome deeds fall under the Bodhisattva precepts. And in this sense, because the Bodhisattva precept does have a formal ceremony that comes with it. So from the Agama Sutras and the subsequent teachings, the 10 wholesome actions have been regarded as primary virtuous behaviors and are jointly presented with the 5 precepts. So within the Buddha Dharma, the precepts and Vinaya can be regarded as one and the same, yet they do have some differences depending on context. Precepts refer to the individual rules. So rule number 1, do not kill. Rule number 2, do not steal. These are the precepts. Vinaya, the definition can actually be broader in terms of not just including the precepts, but it also includes the various guidelines and regulations that cover the more practical aspects of living in a sangha, such as how do we run a meeting among the monks and nuns? How do you make a formal decision, which then becomes applicable to everyone in the sangha, and so forth. So Vinaya, in that sense, is a much broader meaning, not just the precepts. Now, whether one vows to uphold the precepts on their own or you undergo a formal ceremony to accept the precepts from a spiritual teacher, when you're talking about the 10 wholesome deeds, when you make that commitment, it's to uphold the precepts. So the commitment is to the precepts and the fundamental precepts. These 10 wholesome deeds are considered to be the fundamental precepts. So based on the environment in which one is practicing and based on your spiritual foundation, Buddha actually set different sets of precepts for Buddhist disciples to uphold. So there are 8 types of Vinayas in total, and these encompass all the different types of precepts in the Sravaka practice. So among the 8, you've got the 5, the 8, and the 10 precepts. And particularly, these 3 sets of precepts are particularly suited to householders. Even though, remember, the 5 precepts and the 10 wholesome precepts, they're considered fundamental to all 5 vehicles. The remaining 5 sets of precepts are for monastic practitioners, ranging from the novices to the fully ordained. So in terms of the 8 types of precepts, what is listed there is to give you an idea in terms of the Buddhist Vinaya, how many different sets of precepts it encompasses. So 4 and 5 refer to the novice precepts, and the precepts for males and the precepts for females are pretty much the same. And then you have the full monastic precepts, which are the set 6 and 7. Now, the male precepts and the female precepts do have overlapping precepts, but we also have separate rules as well. So some of the rules that apply to myself as a bhikkhuni is not found in the bhikkhu precepts and vice versa. And then the 8th set is the Shiksamana precept, which is an in-between for females. From the female novice, you then have the Shiksamana stage, and then you have the fully ordained stage. Now, originally, the Shiksamana stage occurred because what happened was in the Buddha's time, there was an incident where a young woman was allowed to take ordination, but she already had previously been married, and I think she was either a widow or divorced. But she didn't realize she was pregnant when she took full ordination. So eventually, over time, her pregnancy showed, and this created a lot of gossip from the villagers. You know, they're saying, who's the father? Is it this monk or that monk, or is it someone else? So to avoid, things happening like that, the Shiksamana stage is a 2-year training phase. The original, one of the background stories to the Shiksamana precept is that particular aspect of testing to see if married women have entered the Sangha unknowingly pregnant. But nowadays, it's considered a different stage of practice to really see if we are determined and capable of then upholding the bhikkhuni precepts well. So the 10 wholesome precepts, or the 10 wholesome deeds, are summarized in this table, and they can be split into precepts concerning bodily actions, verbal speech, and mental activities. So in terms of bodily actions, there is the rules of no killing, no stealing, and no sexual misconduct. In terms of speech, you have no lying, no double tongue, no harsh speech, and no idle speech. And then in terms of the mental activities, it refers to not having no greed. So in this, even though it says no greed, no hatred, anger, no incorrect views, I'm sure you will know that it's impossible to cut it off straight away. So what this is referring to is we need to make the aspiration in our cultivation to slowly reduce our greed and craving, to slowly reduce our temper, our anger, our frustration and hatred, and so forth. And similarly, in terms of no incorrect views, it means that we actively try to develop right views. Okay? So when we're talking about no killing, no stealing, sexual misconduct, it's pretty much the same as what we covered in the 5 precepts, so I won't go over that. Now we go and have a bit more of a discussion on the 10 precepts relating to speech. So there are 4 in this aspect. Now here, again, no lying is very similar to the aspect in the 5 precept. But when you see no double tongue, this means to not use speech to cause disharmony and sow discord between people. A harsh speech basically means to not use foul and abusive language, no swearing with malicious intent and so forth. And this is also something that for people, particularly some of the younger people, they swear, but it's out of habit. Sometimes because of the group they hang around with, for no reason at all. They haven't been stirred up, they haven't been abused or whatnot. But some people I've heard, they always start off any sentence with a swear word. I don't know why, but for them it just becomes habitual. So when you want to uphold the 10 precepts well, and you have that habit, then it means you need to put in effort to recognize and be mindful that, there's foul language coming out of you, whether you know it or not. And then idle speech means meaningless talk. And in this sense, it's not just meaningless talk in terms of wasting time and gossiping and all that. It also means talk that can incite lust and violence as well. So sometimes when you're joking around with people or talking, it can also include, love songs and poetry, or jokes and flirtatious chatter and so forth as well. So that all falls under the broad umbrella of idle speech. So humans communicate with each other and we relay our thoughts and emotions using language. So although speech can communicate our intentions and thoughts, there is a saying, the human mouth is as fast as the wind. And there are physical limits in terms of, even though there are physical limits in terms of how far we can project our speech. But with the development of modern technology, we can actually project our speech much further now. Okay, so the human mouth is as fast as the wind. Sometimes it's referring to, we might say things without realizing it, and then we say, oops, I didn't mean to say that. So speech is in an important part of our life because it helps us to connect with others and so forth. And by that same means, we need to be careful when we use our speech. Now, apart from talking too fast and letting the tongue slip, there is also another saying, which is words are sharper than swords. So harming someone is not just about getting a club and beating them or shooting them with a gun. Sometimes the words we say can be just as harmful, if not more. So we need to be very careful with our speech and language. And these 4 precepts concerning speech is to help us develop that kind speech, the wholesome activity of kind speech. So now we come to the last 3 precepts concerning the mind or mental activities, and that is to abandon greed, which means to eventually free our thoughts from coveting other people's things. Abandoning hatred means that we no longer hold anger, resentment towards others. Abandon incorrect views basically means we actively cultivate right views. So this is in a bit of a nutshell, the 10 wholesome precepts or the 10 wholesome deeds. And hopefully you can see that why are they referred to as fundamental? Because even if you're not a Buddhist, these moral activities are something that is wholesome, that we can encourage people to uphold and undertake without having to stamp the badge of this is what a Buddhist would do. We can say this is what a decent person would do. And it would be just as logical an argument. Okay, so all wholesome actions, in fact, can be embodied by these 10 wholesome deeds, because all our actions come from either physical actions, verbal speech, or our mental activities. But more importantly, it's the aspect of our mental activities, because with our mental activities, when they get strong enough, then volition transforms that into our actions and speech. So the last three of no hatred, no greed, no incorrect views is actually very important to work with. And according to the Mahayana teachings concerning these 10 wholesome deeds, they are the foundation of the Bodhisattva precepts, as well as the foundation of the Sravaka, Pratyeka Buddha, heavenly and humanly vehicle practices. So these 10 wholesome precepts are indeed fundamental precepts. And that is why the verse says, wholesome human and heavenly practices rely on it. The three-vehicle path is established on account of it. Now, within the Buddha Dharma, the 10 wholesome deeds are moral conduct that applies from start to finish on the path. And this is just like when we read, and this is an excerpt from the Sutra on the Dragon King of the Ocean, and it tells us, all wholesome karma is the foundation to perfect the human and heavenly vehicle practices, is the foundation for the attainment of the Sravaka and Pratyeka Buddha enlightenment, and is the foundation for the attainment of unsurpassed perfect enlightenment. So unsurpassed perfect enlightenment refers to Buddhahood. What does foundation refer to? It refers to the 10 wholesome deeds. So here, Venerable Yin-Shun is providing a sutra quote to basically tell you this is not something he's just made up. We can find evidence in the sutra that says the 10 wholesome deeds are the foundation for basically all the practices of the 5 vehicles. And continuing on, the sutra tells us, the practice of the 10 wholesome deeds is the foundation for attainment of human and heavenly births. The fruit of these Sravakas who have learning and no more learning. So here when you see have learning and no more learning, have learning are the arahats who have only attained the first, second, and third fruition. No more learning are those who have attained the 4th fruition of a full arahat. They don't have any more to do. So if you think back to the Agama Sutras, there's always the quote, when someone attains final 4th fruition, they have a quote that ends with, and there is nothing more for me to do here. Something along that lines anyway. So that's just to explain what who have learning and no more learning is referring to. The enlightenment of Pratyeka Buddhas, as well as all the wonderful practices of the Bodhisattva. It is the foundation for all practices in the Buddha Dharma. So this is effectively kind of repeating in a different way and explaining again in a different way what this part is saying. So it's the wholesome karma. All wholesome karma is the foundation. And here it's then referring to it in terms of the attainments of the different vehicles. Okay, so that was a bit of a marathon, but I'll stop here with these two quotes because tomorrow we will then begin, and hopefully with the last two lessons, I'll be able to cover the practice of meditation or developing meditative concentration. So what we have next, 8:30, um, uh, is the next lesson that we're scheduled. What I'm going to do with that is because subsequently we have repentance. Um, and last night, I think for most of you, perhaps you haven't been exposed to the practice of repentance or the style of chanting that we use. So hopefully we can spend a little bit of time in class learning how to chant. And then when we do the repentance later on in the meditation hall, hopefully you'll be able to participate more and actually gain more of it. So even though the retreat itself focuses a lot on listening to Dharma teaching, so it's a bit more theoretical, a bit more like an education type system, but the practice of Buddhism, you also have the spiritual aspect. And some of that spiritual aspect can only really be felt when you do things like chanting as a group. So sometimes morning and evening chanting, if you participate or if you can't chant, even just listening, hopefully you'll be able to feel a very different type of energy and serenity from that. So I'd like everyone to be able to practice the repentance together because that is our collective karma as well, if we're able to help each other through the practice of repentance. So I'll explain a bit more about that practice of repentance by reciting Shakyamuni Buddha's name and then making a bow, and then what you should do with your visualization when you're bowing down and so forth, so that you can get the most out of the repentance practice, which caps off the days, and then you guys can go to bed. Yes, so did you have a question, Joanne? Okay. All right. So
I'm questioning student
now. Yes, well, you ask questions and you become wiser. Okay, so any questions? If not, we'll end this lesson and we'll break until 8:30.